Well, thanks for coming. We called you today so that we could speak about the shutdown of Eastleigh as well as Old Town, Mombasa. And the fact that in the last day or so the government has extended the closure for another 2 weeks, which has raised some serious concerns about the socio-economic well-being of the people of those two areas. The first point I would like to raise is the fact that the Ministry of Health has not been able to engage the communities affected. It has not been able to explain the rationale for the enclosure, what was the expected outcome, what were the metrics, and how has that changed since the last 2 weeks of the enclosure? What progress have we made? Instead of getting that feedback from the Ministry of Health and getting our people together, because we are not going to defeat the coronavirus through bureaucracy. We're going to defeat it by our population taking ownership and playing their part in that particular fight, which is critical for all of us. Now, that lack of communication and feedback is worrying because we don't know how many tests have been done so far, how many people have been found positive, how many people have recovered, and what was the expected outcome in getting this cessation, restriction of movement. Even after the end of the next 2 weeks, what is the criteria that the Ministry of Health and the public health experts are going to use to determine whether their action was a success or not? So these things need to be answered by the Ministry of Health for us to be able to go forward. I want to specifically speak about Eastleigh. Eastleigh has a population of 260,000. The overwhelming majority of its residents are either unemployed or engaged in low-wage informal employment and are struggling to make ends meet. Eastleigh is also a major business hub, the third largest in fact after the CBD and Westlands. An estimated 120,000 people go to work in Eastleigh every day, and another 100,000 go to trade and shop there. So if you look at that, their livelihoods, incomes, and well-beings of all these people, which is at risk as a result of this particular order. The closure has also placed additional hardships on the poor people of Kamkunji. By the government's own statistics, Kamkunji is the neighborhood with the largest number of vulnerable communities and neighborhoods in Kenya. Kamkunji has 235,000 informal settlement residents. It is bigger than Mathare, it is bigger than Kibera, it is bigger than many other places where you would expect to find problems. So the residents of the informal settlements such as Kiambiu, Kinyago, Kanuku, Motherland, as well as neighboring areas such as Majengo and Blue Estate have been hit hard and are already reeling from the economic shock of the prolonged closure. These are communities that even before the COVID-19 were living on the margins of society and struggling to survive. Many of them have no safety nets and any social protection. They're on their own. They are fast approaching the end of their coping mechanism, and they will soon have nothing left to cushion them from the hard socio-economic effects of the restrictions. We're starting to stare at a humanitarian situation. We need quick mitigation measures to address the negative consequences and the closure of places like Eastleigh. Otherwise, we're going to have hunger. So that's why I think the government needs to rethink its approach to this particular problem. It's just not practical to put one small part of our neighborhood under restrictions and expect that things will work out. What would happen the next day when that neighborhood is opened up? How is it going to be protected? How are the people in the rest of Nairobi going to be protected from the other areas now that have silent carriers of the disease? Thousands of who are walking around spreading the disease. So there must be new ways of dealing with this particular issue other than putting people at economic risk and hardships as we are seeing now. The other directive of the Ministry of Health is also to close all the malls. It just doesn't make sense when you have closed a neighborhood and you close its shops. Where do they expect the population to go and shop? Where do they expect people to go and work within that enclosure itself, within Eastleigh itself, if the shops and the businesses are not going to open? And these are not actually specified in the order number 2, which has imposed cessation of movements on places like Eastleigh. So these are the key issues that we are raising, and we would like the government to take action. The first thing that we would request is urgent direct food assistance to the vulnerable communities. This must happen quickly to avert hunger. The second element I would add, as far as the government is concerned, is to expand the youth employment program, the National Hygiene program, increase the number of young people employed on that program to help places like Kamukunji, which are in difficult situations. The third request also that social intervention and social protection is to expand the cash transfer to include more people. A lot of people are now sitting at home, they're unemployed. What would happen? They have families, they have children. All these people need to be fed. And unless we can take quick action, we're going to have problems. So I'll stop that there and ask Shimiwa Abdul Samad to come on.